There comes a moment in every life when the mask cracks, when the world you built no longer fits the shape of your soul. Jung called it the pull of the self, an ancient force whispering, disappear not to escape, but to shed, to step out of the noise like a snake leaving its old skin on the forest floor. You don't vanish from the world, you vanish from who you were trained to be. This is the silent rebellion, the first note of your comeback. The world won't see it. They're not meant to. Transformation begins behind the eyes, where shadows gather, where symbols move like dark birds across the psyche, where your true name waits in the depths. This is the threshold between the life you inherited and the life you choose. And crossing it feels like death because part of you is dying. Let it. Let the old patterns rot. Let the inflated ego crack like ice under a rising sun. You're not losing yourself, you're excavating yourself. If you're ready to disappear into your own darkness so you can return with real power, comment, I'm crossing my threshold, and stay with me. Part 2 is where the metamorphosis begins, and remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next step into the shadow. Number 2, the descent into shadow. Every rebirth demands a descent, and yours begins the moment you step away from the roles that once defined you. This isn't a dramatic disappearance, it's a quiet slipping beneath the surface, like sinking into deep water where sound dissolves and time slows. Jung understood this territory well. The shadow realm, the place where the pieces of you that were rejected, silenced, or forgotten still breathe in the dark. Down here, you confront mirrors that don't flatter you, truths that scrape your pride, and memories that refuse to stay buried. But this descent isn't punishment, it is purification. In the underworld of your own psyche, you begin to see what the surface blinded you to, the hidden strengths tucked beneath your fears, the dormant potential wrapped inside your wounds, the instincts that society taught you to suppress. As you move deeper, the light you used to rely on fades, but something else begins to glow, a strange internal fire that doesn't flicker or ask permission. It whispers, reminders of who you were before the world convinced you to play small. Down here, you meet the archetypes that shape the architecture of your soul, the warrior sharpening his resolve in silence, the magician gathering power from the unseen, the hermit holding a lantern made of solitude and truth. You begin to understand that your disappearance isn't abandonment, it is alignment. It is a return to the source code of your being. Listen closely. The darkness isn't trying to swallow you, it's trying to sculpt you. Pain becomes a chisel. Uncertainty becomes a doorway. Silence becomes a teacher. You are not lost. You are being reforged. And when the world no longer has access to you, it can no longer define you. If you're feeling the pull of this inner descent, comment, my shadow is my forge. Let the world above wonder where you went. You're not gone. You're transforming. Number 3, the alchemy of emptiness. When you descend deeply enough into your own psyche, you eventually arrive at a territory most people never dare to enter. The inner clearing where everything you've used to define yourself dissolves. What remains is emptiness, but not the hollow, despairing kind. This is the sacred void, the psychological chrysalis where your old stories, roles, and identities fall away like charred fragments of a previous life. Jung understood this emptiness as a necessary phase in individuation, a moment when the ego loosens its grip and the deeper self begins to rearrange the inner architecture of your being. In this strange stillness, you may feel unnerved, even disoriented, because your mind no longer echoes with the familiar noise that once provided false certainty. But silence is not loss. Silence is preparation. In the quiet, your unconscious begins its subtle alchemy, pulling symbols from the darkness, weaving meaning from fragments, guiding you back to the forgotten corridors of your soul. This emptiness is not a sign of collapse. It is the blank page that every powerful transformation demands. Think of a forest after a fire, blackened, exposed, stripped of its former shape. Yet beneath the ash, seeds awaken, roots strengthen, Life reorganizes itself in ways the old forest never could. You are in that same sacred burning. And just like that forest, you are not dying. You are recalibrating. In the emptiness, you become aware of the stories that were never yours, the expectations that bent your spine, the personas you carried like armor. Let them fall. Let the inner fire refine you. The void is not asking you to retreat, it's asking you to release. Only then can something new surface, a sharper instinct, a deeper voice, a more authentic direction. This phase shapes the comeback long before the world sees it. Here, in the vast quiet, you reclaim the pieces of yourself that were buried beneath survival. You learn to stand without validation, to breathe without permission, to exist without distortion. Emptiness becomes your forge, stillness becomes your discipline, and from this depth, your next form begins to rise, not forced, not performed, but inevitable. If you feel this inner clearing opening inside you, comment, "I rise from the hollow." Number 4, the reclaiming of the lost self. There comes a moment after the emptiness has stripped you clean, when the deeper layers of your being begin to stir like ancient animals waking from a long winter. This is the phase Jung hinted at when he spoke of confronting the forgotten pieces of the psyche, the parts you exiled to survive, the instincts you buried to be accepted, the truths you silenced to keep peace. Now, in the renewed quiet of your inner world, these fragments rise from the shadows, not as threats, but as guides. They carry the strength you abandoned, the creativity you dismissed, the intuition you drowned out with noise. Reclaiming them is not a delicate process. It is raw, demanding, and strangely intimate. You face versions of yourself you once labeled unworthy or dangerous. The warrior who refused to bow, the rebel who questioned everything, the lover who felt too deeply, the sage who spoke truths that others found uncomfortable. Each one stands before you with something you lost, something the world punished, misunderstood, or feared. This is the moment you stop apologizing for your depth. You pick up the sword of your own clarity, the shield of your boundaries, the fire of your voice, and you feel the weight of yourself return. Old shame dissolves under the heat of recognition. Old fears shrink when held up to the light of understanding. You realize that nothing inside you was ever the enemy. It was your disconnection from those inner forces that weakened you. Now, as you reclaim them, you begin to feel your soul reorganize with new gravity. You walk differently, you think differently. The world's old hooks no longer catch you. You remember your wildness, not chaos, but the untamed intelligence of your authentic nature. You remember your silence, not avoidance, but the sharpened edge of awareness. You remember your hunger, not desperation, but the instinctual pull toward the life meant for you. Integrating these inner figures gives you a strength that cannot be faked. The strength of someone who has met themselves completely and refused to look away. And as this integration deepens, you feel a new presence forming inside, a self that is whole, unfragmented, unashamed, and quietly powerful. This is the real beginning of your return, the slow ignition of the person you were destined to become. And if you feel something ancient in you rising to greet this truth, comment, "I reclaim what's mine." Number 5. The right of inner confrontation. There is a point in every transformation where reclaiming what was lost is no longer enough. You must confront what still holds power over you, the unresolved conflicts, the inherited wounds, the unfinished stories that anchor your soul to old versions of yourself. Jung called this the confrontation with the unconscious, and it is here that your real battle begins. Not a battle against the world, but against the distortions that grew inside you when you were too young to defend your truth. These inner ghosts don't speak in clear sentences. They whisper through reactions, patterns, and instincts that flare up when you're triggered. They live in the tightness of your chest when you try to set boundaries, in the hesitation you feel when opportunity calls, in the lingering doubts that cloud your courage. You don't conquer them by force. You conquer them by facing them with calm, brutal honesty. You sit with the fear instead of running. You listen to the anger instead of burying it. You acknowledge the grief you once pretended didn't hurt. And as you do, something shifts. The monsters you carried were never monsters. They were emotions that hardened into armor because no one taught you how to hold them. They soften when understood. They transform when welcomed. This confrontation becomes a rite of passage, a sacred reckoning where you meet the shadows not as a victim, but as a sovereign. The child in you finally feels protected. The wounded one finally feels heard. The shadow finally feels seen, and as these inner parts settle into harmony, your energy stops leaking into battles that no longer matter. You feel whole in a way that doesn't require validation. You feel steady in a way that doesn't collapse under pressure. You feel powerful in a way that doesn't need to be announced. The world senses this shift, though it can't name it. People who once intimidated you feel smaller. Opportunities that once overwhelmed you feel attainable. Boundaries that once terrified you now feel natural. You become a force shaped not by aggression, but by alignment. In confronting yourself, you become unshakable. You become your own foundation. And if you feel this quiet strength taking root in the deepest part of you, comment, "I face my shadows with power." Number 6, the stillness before the ascent. There comes a moment after the great inner confrontation when the world inside you finally stops shaking. Not because everything is fixed or perfected, but because the war between your fragments has ended. What follows is a silence so profound it almost feels supernatural. A stillness that settles over your inner landscape like fresh snow, softening every harsh edge, quieting every frantic impulse. This stillness is not emptiness, it is integration. It is the first breath your soul takes after being underwater for years. Jung understood this phase as the emergence of the self, the unifying center of the psyche that rises only when the ego stops fighting for control. Here, in this rare quiet, you begin to sense a new internal alignment. Emotions that once clashed now communicate. Desires that once contradicted now converge. Parts of you that once fought for dominance now work together like a long-separated family, finally reunited around a single fire. In this stillness, your mind becomes clearer, not because the world simplifies, but because you finally understand what truly matters. You stop chasing validation. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop bending yourself into shapes that betray your nature. Instead, you notice the subtle signals your deeper self sends, intuitive nudges, symbolic dreams, shifts in instinct that pull you toward what nourishes your growth rather than what drains it. This is the stage where your inner voice becomes unmistakably yours, no longer distorted by fear or obligation. You start hearing it with precision, and its messages cut through the noise with a kind of spiritual authority. In the stillness, decisions become easier, not because life becomes easy, but because you are no longer divided against yourself. This internal unity creates a calm that others can feel before you even speak. They notice the way you move, measured, grounded, unhurried. They notice the way you hold silence, not awkwardly, but confidently, like someone who knows their energy speaks louder than noise. They notice the way you choose where to invest your time, your attention, your heart. You no longer scatter yourself out of fear of missing something. You no longer cling to people who cannot meet you. You no longer grasp for outcomes that compromise your integrity. This stillness gives birth to a discipline that is not forced, but natural. You begin to structure your life around what strengthens your soul: rituals, boundaries, creative acts, solitude, physical practices, moments of reflection. You start feeding your psyche with intention rather than impulse. You stop expecting quick transformations and instead commit to slow mastery. This is where your power becomes long-lasting. The world may not see the work you're doing, but it feels the shift. The energy you carry becomes heavier, richer, more magnetic. People sense a depth in you they can't fully explain. Some will be drawn closer, others will fade away. Both outcomes are natural. Both outcomes are necessary. In this stillness, you realize that disappearing from your old life was not an escape. It was an evolution. You stepped away to build the internal strength required for the ascent that waits ahead. You are no longer climbing from desperation. You are rising from alignment. You are no longer striving to prove yourself. You are moving toward the life that resonates with your true frequency. This stillness is not the end of your transformation. It is the moment your new trajectory locks into place. It is the breath before the lift. It is the pause before the breakthrough. It is the silent promise your soul makes to the future you are about to reclaim. And if you feel this deep inner quiet forming its own gravity inside you, comment, "My stillness is my power." Number 7. The rising of the inner sovereign. There is a point in the journey when the stillness inside you begins to gather into something denser, heavier, more deliberate, like a storm forming far out at sea, invisible but undeniable. This is the phase where your transformation stops being an internal secret and begins shifting the very architecture of your presence. Jung understood this emergence as the rise of the inner sovereign, the archetype that embodies authority, direction, and self-governance. It does not shout. It does not demand. It simply is. When this archetype awakens, you feel a new kind of gravity in your chest, a weight that is not burden but clarity. You begin to move through the world differently, not with arrogance, but with purpose, as though your steps are guided by an unseen compass aligned with the deepest patterns of your psyche. Decisions that once sparked anxiety now feel simple. Paths that once seemed impossible now unfold naturally. The world has not changed. You have. And because you have, the world responds accordingly. This rising is subtle at first. You notice it in the way you say no without explanation, as if protecting your time and energy is the most natural act in the world. You notice it in the way you no longer chase people who treat you like an option, nor do you shrink yourself to make others comfortable. The sovereign within you refuses to be ruled by fear, guilt, or urgency. It chooses, it directs, it claims. You stop waiting for approval before making a move. You stop softening your voice when speaking truth. You stop abandoning your intuition in favor of logic that was taught to you, not born in you. This is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is alignment with a deeper law, the law of the self, the psychic blueprint that has been trying to guide you since childhood. And now that you've cleared the noise, you can finally hear it. As this archetype strengthens, something remarkable happens. Your past no longer intimidates you. The wounds that once haunted you now feel like chapters in a story you've already understood. The shame that once silenced you now feels irrelevant, like an echo from a previous lifetime. You begin to recognize how much power you gave away simply because you forgot who you were. And with this recognition comes a reclamation of authority, not over others, but over yourself. Your emotions stop driving the ship. Your fears stop dictating the plot. Your insecurities stop negotiating your value. You become the one who directs the inner forces instead of being dragged behind them. Others feel this shift even if they can't name it. Some will be drawn to your calm intensity, the way your presence feels grounded and unshakable. Others will feel threatened because your clarity forces them to confront their own confusion. Do not shrink for either group. The sovereign rises not to dominate, but to embody integrity so fully that everything that cannot survive honesty falls away. Relationships recalibrate. Opportunities refine themselves. Your environment reorganizes according to the strength of your boundaries. And through it all, you remain centered, calm, and steady. Not because life is easy, but because you are no longer fragmented inside. This rising marks the moment when you finally understand that the comeback you are building is not just external. It is psychological, spiritual, symbolic. You are becoming someone the previous version of you would have never believed possible. You are becoming someone the world will have no choice but to recognize. And if you feel that inner authority waking up in your bones, comment, "I rise as my own sovereign." Number 8. The strategy of the invisible rebuilding. There comes a stage in every true transformation where you begin rebuilding your life from a vantage point that only the initiated can understand. It is not loud, not dramatic, not designed for public observation. It is deliberate, disciplined, almost ritualistic. Jung knew that authentic change never erupts outward first. It takes root in the inner sanctum, in the symbolic workshop where new patterns are forged in silence. This is where you become strategic about your rebirth. You no longer scatter your energy. You no longer invest in what drains you. You no longer confuse motion with progress. Instead, you begin constructing a life that reflects your inner evolution with a precision that feels almost surgical. You look at your relationships, routines, habits, and environments through a sharper lens. What once seemed acceptable now feels misaligned. What once felt comforting now feels suffocating. What once looked like opportunity now reveals itself as distraction. You start reorganizing your world not from emotion, but from sovereignty. You remove what dilutes your focus. You strengthen what nourishes your purpose. You design your days around rituals that ground you: stillness, movement, reflection, work done with intention rather than frenzy. You become a curator of your own existence. This rebuilding is not glamorous. It is not the montage scene in movies where everything comes together quickly. It is slow, steady, disciplined work, the kind of work that reshapes your character more than your circumstances at first. But you begin to notice subtle shifts. You wake with more clarity. You make choices with less hesitation. You feel less reactive to noise and more aligned with your long-term vision. Your inner world and your outer world begin mirroring each other with increasing accuracy. And because you've confronted your shadows and reclaimed your authentic self, your desires are no longer rooted in insecurity. They are rooted in truth. You want what strengthens you, not what distracts you. You pursue what aligns with your deeper calling, not what feeds your ego. This phase requires patience because you are learning to build without rushing, to grow without forcing, to rise without announcing. It is the discipline of becoming the person your future requires. And as this invisible rebuilding continues, your life develops structure where chaos once reigned. You create boundaries that serve as gates, protecting your energy. You create habits that serve as anchors, stabilizing your growth. You create goals that serve as North Stars, guiding your movement. In this stage, you understand something most people never learn. Power grows quietly before it is ever seen publicly. And if you feel this silent reconstruction taking shape in your life, comment, "I build my power in silence." Number 9. The return of the undeniable self. There comes a time in every transformation when the internal rebuilding reaches a point of critical mass and something within you begins to surge upward with the force of inevitability. It isn't ego, it isn't bravado, it is recognition, an ancient memory of your true shape finally returning to the surface. Jung understood this emerging phase as the reappearance of the individuated self, the version of you that is no longer diluted by expectations, fear, or past identities. This return is not loud, it is unmistakable. You begin stepping back into the world with a calm fierceness, like someone who has survived a private war and now carries the quiet authority of victory. The energy you carry changes the air when you enter a room. You don't try to be seen, you simply are. You don't try to speak with power, your voice already holds it. You don't try to command respect. Your presence earns it before a word leaves your mouth. And this time, you're not performing confidence. You are confidence. Your actions come from alignment rather than desperation. Your boundaries arise from clarity rather than defensiveness. Your goals are chosen with intention rather than impulse. You move with a steadiness that wasn't available to the earlier versions of you because now your inner world is unified. There is no internal civil war draining your focus. No fragmented self pulling you apart. No old wounds steering your decisions. You walk through life carrying a symbolic crown. Not one granted by the world, but one forged in the shadows of your own transformation. The people around you sense the shift. Some will be drawn to the depth they can't articulate, the grounded energy that feels like a refuge in a chaotic world. Others will feel unsettled, not because you threaten them, but because your clarity exposes their confusion. Let both responses unfold. You no longer shape yourself for approval or dim your fire for comfort. You've earned the right to take up space without apology. You've earned the right to speak with conviction without over-explaining. You've earned the right to choose your path without defending it to anyone. This is not arrogance. It is psychological maturity. It is the self reclaiming the throne from every fear, every doubt, every outdated story that once played puppeteer with your identity. And as you return to the world, you carry the weight of someone who has gone into the underworld of their psyche and come back with treasure, wisdom, intuition, discipline, vision. You become a mirror that reflects possibility to those who are still lost, and a boundary that repels those who would pull you backward. You stop chasing, proving, begging, explaining. You start creating, embodying, choosing, and becoming. Your life begins to rearrange around this new frequency, attracting what aligns and dissolving what doesn't. This is the moment your comeback becomes visible, not because you announce it, but because you are it. And if you feel your true self rising back into the world with unshakable power, comment, "I return as my undeniable self." Number 10. The comeback that rewrites your destiny. There is a moment, quiet, steady, almost imperceptible, when your transformation stops being an internal evolution and becomes a force that reshapes your entire path. Not through force, but through alignment. Not through noise, but through presence. This is the phase Jung would call the realization of the self, the moment when your inner world and outer world finally echo the same truth. Your comeback isn't a return to who you were. It's an emergence of who you were always meant to become. You move differently now, with the calm certainty of someone who has walked through their own darkness and learned to navigate by instinct, symbolism, and inner sovereignty. You no longer look for signs, you are the sign. You don't ask permission from the world. You create the spaces you belong in. The obstacles that once overwhelmed you now feel like thresholds you were built to cross. The voices that once controlled your self-worth now sound distant, irrelevant, stripped of their old power. You trust your judgment. You trust your intuition. You trust your timing. Your life begins to respond accordingly. Doors open that once stayed shut. Opportunities gather around your steadiness, and people who resonate with your new frequency appear as if summoned. This is the comeback that doesn't need validation because it exists beyond the reach of doubt. It's the life that emerges when you stop abandoning yourself. It's the destiny that begins when you stop shrinking. It's the future that forms when you finally stand as the integrated, sovereign, unfragmented self. Your rise is not explosive. It is inevitable. It is earned. It is written in the shadows you conquered and the truths you reclaimed. And if you feel this final transformation igniting in your bones, comment, "My comeback is unstoppable." And remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.